Hi, this is another episode of Treasure Valley Quick Tips. And what it is I'm a franchise owner of Network in Action, which is out of Houston, Texas, once a month professional referral groups. And I run in those groups, I run into people that are super knowledgeable in their fields. And bring them onto the show to share their expertise and knowledge. And today's a perfect example. So, Mike, introduce yourself.
All right, thanks, Scott. My name is Mike McClure. I'm with Murray, Zill, and Johnston. I've been an attorney since about 14 years now. And
Wow.
so it's been a while. I've had exposure to a number of different areas. But primarily what I focus on is transactional work stemming from business formations, partnership agreements, employee contracts, non-disclosure agreements, things of that nature, estate planning. So been doing it for a while, been doing a lot of things.
For 14 years, you probably picked up a few things on the way.
Yes,
So,
sir.
yeah, one question I have is, and I've always wondered this because even when I check out somebody like for the group or to even visit, first thing I do is go to the state secretary site and see if their business is listed. So what when you say register your business, is that what you're talking about? What would you say for a business? Why do they need to register their business?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I'm talking about the Secretary of State.
Okay.
And a lot of people they want to just start doing their business. They have an idea, or maybe they just stumbled into it and they just start doing it and they just get
Right.
busy and they just keep doing their own thing. But if you don't take any action to register with the Secretary of State, then you're just basically a default sole proprietor. And when you do business like that, all the risk falls on you individually. So the benefit of registering with the Secretary of State is, and I'm not saying just go out and get a doing business as designation for how you're operating your business. I'm talking about setting up whether it be a corporation or an LLC, the limited
Right.
liability company, because that's what is really going to provide you, the individual, with the buffer for any risk, any liability that you might be exposed to. Let's say you have a service company, you're out there working on people's homes. Sometimes things can happen, and if they come after
Right.
you, uh, you don't want to have that type of liability.
So if you're, let's say you're a plumber going out on their own and you go and you do some work, you don't register, you get busy, and you open up and you don't register with state, don't get an LLC set up or any of that stuff. And you went to work on someone's water heater and then, uh, you know, who knows, but you're gone and all of a sudden it floods all over everything and ruins a bunch of stuff. Is that a good example of where you're going to have some protection versus none?
Right. Because I mean, the ideal scenario would be that, hey, you at least have insurance for the company, right? Or for yourself
Okay.
that would cover it. But the sad reality is that sometimes you don't have the proper insurance coverage, or what you think would be covered isn't covered. And now the homeowner just has their sole recourse is to come after you. If you don't have that business entity, something that the state looks at and says, this is an entity that is distinct from the person running it, then yeah, you very well could face that personal liability and having to cover any damages that were done to the property.
Okay, one other quick thing here. So someone comes to you, they want to set up a business. So what are some things you're going to do for them or tell them to
Okay,
do?
so right. So first off, you want to make sure that the name that you want to do business under, that it's available, right? That you're not going to have
Okay.
any issues with the state coming back and saying, "Hey, actually, there's already a company that has this name that is so similar that you're just going to cause confusion in the workplace." So you want to be able to, and from a marketing standpoint, you want to be able to have like your own
Yeah.
niche anyway.
Yep.
And so that's one of the first things we look at is we discuss different names, uh, discuss the benefits of one name over another. We hop onto the Secretary of State website, make sure that name is available in the first place. But yeah, once it's decided, like, hey, look, I've talked with my accountant. We feel like this would be the best structure for my company. This is what I want to do. Then I talked to him about like, okay, great, we can easily get that registered. You can go onto irs.gov. We can pull a EIN for you. Um, Make sure we start doing those formalities that help distinguish you, the person, uh, from your company, right?
Right.
And so, once you've got the company registered with the Secretary of State, you have an EIN, you're going to need to have governing documents like an operating agreement. And I'll get into that here in a second, but
Okay.
you can then take those documents to the bank, and they can actually set up a bank account for your company. And then you can start getting insurance under your company name. And you can do all those things to keep the company its own thing and
Right.
not tied to your personal insurance, not tied to your personal name. Um, and so again, those are the benefits because you don't want to take on risk unnecessarily, right?
Right.
And then
You're starting a new business. That's a risk enough.
right, you're gonna have other things to worry about beyond
Yeah.
being sued. And so you're absolutely right. And now I brought up the operating agreement in the
Yeah.
context of a limited liability company because that is one document the bank is going to want to see. They want to see that you have basically that there is a company and that you have authority to open up this bank account.
Right.
And but more than that, this is the document that you have that you can point to say this is how my business operates. And so sometimes if you're just out in business on your own, you're thinking, well, big deal, right? Like
Right.
I make all the decisions. I'm the only person, right? But at the end of the day, when you start a business, you want to grow that business, right? And there's going to come a time where, you maybe want to bring on a partner, and you want to be able to point to the operating agreement, and that outlines everything from who's going to make day-to-day operation decisions, who the manager is as far as the designation, what it takes for, let's say you decide that, hey, with all the growth, we need to inject some capital into the company. So what does that process look like? Um, and if I put in all the capital, can I at least then turn to the other members of the LLC and say, you also have to put in capital because it's required? Or is there going to be a process in place that says if you don't, then I can diminish your percentage as far as your interest in the company? And so you want to make sure that there's things already in place. Um, and I talk about in the context of a sole proprietor, but what if you have this buddy from like, hey, 20 years ago, we
Yeah.
became friends and we worked together on
What
and
could go
off.
wrong? What could go wrong? We're all happy right now.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
5 years from
Everything's
now, the
perfect.
company's worth $2 million or $10 million. Who could get in a disagreement now?
Exactly. Exactly. And hey, maybe right now everything is just amazing, right? Things
Right.
are booming, the business is there, everyone's busy, and you're not thinking twice about things. But what happens if that starts to dwindle?
Right.
Saw this a lot with when COVID hit. All of a sudden businesses couldn't stay open.
Oh,
Service businesses, people started thinking, oh, maybe I need to cut some expenses back. And now all of a sudden you have a partnership, and no business coming in, and you're looking at your partner and like, well, how are we gonna wind things down? Like we can't keep this going. And then you
right.
start to have those difficult conversations. And maybe one person says, well, hey, look, for the past X amount of years, I've been the one that's been trying to maintain everything. Like, you know, what if I don't want to give this up? Or what if I feel like I should get out a bigger cut when we, close our books? Those are the types of things that, having those conversations in the moment, and maybe one of you is better off than the other financially. And so just from that standpoint, you're like, hey, help a friend out. I need this extra
Yeah.
money. You're fine. But if you already have like your company documents and you've already made those decisions when times were good, then it's just a matter of like, well, this is what the agreement says. We're going to do it,
Right.
by the book.
Yeah. See, it's funny because no matter how many times I've heard bad stories, and there's one recently, two friends of mine, um, you know, I went to breakfast with them. To me, they sounded like a partnership, and company and stuff. And then one of them just pulled the plug, and because he was in control of everything, there's nothing signed, so the other person was just out. And I thought that's a perfect example where they. So now you have an operating agreement. You get that in place, and then you decide to bring a partner on. Then you need to get a partnership agreement, so that way you both know what the rules are. If,
Yeah, so typically in that context, what you would just be doing is bringing on the member, and you would have an agreement outlining like a buy-in, right?
okay.
Here's the terms. You're buying X amount of the company, and here's how you need to pay me either up front or maybe it's a thing that's over time. But that gets reflected into the operating agreement. So you'd want to make a revision
Oh,
to the operating agreement. So then the document reflects all of the members of the
oh,
LLC and what percentage, and if there are any changes to who the manager is going to be or what the operational outlook is going to be. And let's be honest, more often than not, when it is a situation where they're bringing on a partner, a lot of times that's the first time that someone's actually saying, "Hey, I want an operating agreement," because they don't even have one until that point.
oh,
And
yeah,
so you want to get something in place then, and just make sure that it reflects the overall terms of the agreement.
yeah. Well, this is just all great stuff, and like com- companies just get get ahead of themselves and don't do this stuff, and then why not just take a little bit of time, a little bit of money up front, and go to someone like you to help them get things straight. Because again, people's memories get fuzzy when things disagreements come up. you know.
Exactly.
Um, so what are some of the typical contracts you need, like when you're running a bit to protect yourself? If you're running a service business and stuff, what are some of the type agreements you have?
All right, yeah. So as far as if assuming you have like your corporate documents all in place,
Okay.
everything's good there. Um, as you're running your business, you want to make sure that you have we'll stick with that service agreement, for a company that you provide a service, whether it be flooring, plumbing, things of that nature. You want to have um, a contract in place that outlines the scope of your work, because inevitably a homeowner is going to be like, well, I paid you $5,000 and yeah, you went and did A, B, and C, but I thought you were also going to do D. Well, if you
Oh,
don't have anything in writing, well, now you just kind of open up the door that maybe you're going to have to now do more work, but not be compensated for it because now this misunderstanding. So just like there might be a misunderstanding between partners, if you don't have agreements in writing, you're likely to run into those issues
with customers.
with customers, right? And if there's a dispute as to payment, um, even right down to a change order, if you will. Like, you hired me and I do have it in writing and you're paying X amount of dollars for these three items, but as I was doing work, you thought, hey, I like the way you work. I want to also have you do, D, E, and F, and you don't get that in writing, you're still just leaving yourself open to disputes. And so you most certainly want to have the agreement in writing. You also want to outline when payment is due, right?
Oh,
Um, there are some companies that I see that, hey, industry standard, pay me half up front, but I'm going to do all this work and I'm going to complete all the work, and then I'm going to hope at the end that you pay me the other half, right?
right.
And sometimes, depending on the type of work you do, you might have the ability to lien a property to kind of make sure that can incentivize a homeowner to pay, right?
Right.
But there's certain contracts that over $2,000, if you go um and again, this is just generally speaking, not legal
Yeah.
advice here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
generally speaking, you might be deemed by law to be a general contractor. And if you're doing work for a homeowner and you're a general contractor and you don't give them certain disclosures that are required by law,
Hmm.
number one, by default, you're in violation of Consumer Protection Act. but also you may be putting yourself at risk of being able to even put a lien on the property.
Uh-huh.
Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have other avenues to try to get payment if they try to stiff you on that, but a lien carries a lot more force when you're trying to get a homeowner to pay you, and you might inadvertently lose out on that ability to lien a property if you don't give proper mandatory disclosures.
Wow. See, and all this stuff is just the reason why you need to go to someone like you. Because
Right.
it just, like I said, because as you're talking, I'm thinking of stories of people I know that have had problems with customers, and I don't always know the details, but I'm thinking, I'll bet you they didn't go to someone like you up front. I mean, they did it at the backside after something's already went wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that happens all too often where they come after the fact and they say, "Hey, can you help me pick up the pieces?"
Yeah.
But yeah, usually at that point, it's a rough go.
Uh, uh. Um, so here's something, when it comes to intellectual property, I mean, what, help me out with that. Like, what if somebody comes up and they have branding and certain processes that they do that they think are special and all this stuff. I mean, what is considered intellectual property in a business?
Yeah, so intellectual property and even trademarks. I mean, that goes down to like brand name, logos,
Okay.
your process, you know, the, if you manufacture something, right? The context of what that I see it the most in is when someone has this idea and say, "Hey, look, there's this trinket out there. It's already out in the market, but some of the shortfalls that are out there, you can't do this, you can't do that. But I've redesigned it, and there's a process in place where I can, improve this product, right? And I want to make sure that my product under my process avoids those pitfalls, and I want to put that out on the market so that I can cash in on my idea, right? You'll want to make sure, first and foremost, that there's not a process out there already that you are just unaware of, right? You don't want to be treading on someone else's intellectual property rights,
Right.
but more than anything, you want to be able to protect yours. And so there's a process in which you can apply for a patent. There's a
Okay.
process in which you can apply for trademarks. And while I don't do that with my firm, we have a trademark department, and we have registered patent
Okay.
attorneys with the firm that can certainly do this. But again, the context in which I see it more often is, hey, I have this idea and I have this prototype, but I'm going to this manufacturer and I want to tell them, can you manufacture like this for me so I can test it, make sure that it does what I am going to tell people it does. But I don't want this manufacturer to get my idea and to have free reign that they go and you know produce it themselves and they start
Right.
manufacturing it, right? And so that's where I come in with confidentiality agreements,
Okay.
non-disclosures, right? And basically say, hey, party A is going to party B to discuss a potential uh, business deal in which they're going to be my manufacturer for my parts, and I'm going to, you know, sell and bring in business and market. And as I get customers, then you know basically it's just a, hey, we're looking into a business deal that might be fruitful for both of us, but I'm going to be disclosing information that is confidential to my business, that
Oh,
is my intellectual property rights, right? That is subject to a pending patent or something of that nature. And so before I disclose this information, I want to have an agreement on hand that manufacturers saying, yes, I am not gonna uh, tread on your intellectual property rights. I recognize that this is confidential. I recognize that I have a duty to protect this information and that I'm not going to take what you're giving me and use it for my benefit type of thing.
yeah. That that yeah. That's, you need, like you said, you help them get started and then pass them off to somebody who's an expert in those fields. There's a large, I'll tell you, but a franchise company, and they when they came to Idaho, they're nationwide, like 1,000 locations. But when they came to Idaho, at least the Treasure Valley, there's a little lady that had been using that name for years and years and years, and they couldn't. She they said they had to for the Treasure Valley they changed their name. They had to. I thought that was interesting. So that goes to show you they make sure that you get someone that knows what they're doing because, like I said, maybe they did it locally when they first did their franchise, but this franchise got bigger and bigger. Anyway, it's just funny that, um, they're this big company and this because she did. I guess she'd done it right or something. But like I said, they told me that they had to change it for the Treasure Valley, the name. They couldn't use it.
Right. Yeah. So without getting into too much detail, you bring up a good point because some people are like, well, I'm just starting off. I'm a small company. Why do I need to get a trademark, right? Why do I hope to get big, but maybe I'll just get a
Right.
trademark later, once I'm really booming and growing. But the reality is yeah, like there are certain carve outs that protect your use of a name uh, in the geographic region in which you do business. And so there could be some company out in Florida that has this name and they're growing and they're spreading across the nation. But if they come in here and you've gotten you know your use of the name first and they try to impede on that, you can have that protection. And again, without going into detail, there's
Yeah.
state trademarks and then there's also the federal. And so
Well,
there's things that if you're using a name, that's your name, right? And if you can get the trademark, go for it because that can save you a headache. So
well, no, that's good. It's just overall, it's just like so. Um, we'll kind of wrap it up here. This has been good stuff. Just overall, what it does to me again and again is just that if you're in business, just take time to reach out to someone like Mike and his team because it's just you're just like leaving yourself completely vulnerable. So what the last one here is I want to know some besides some of the stuff we talked about, or maybe you can go back loop it, but on a small business, um, uh, like what do you what I'm sure you see patterns of talking to the same people over and over again. So what are some patterns you've seen recently that companies maybe a company comes to you several company owners and they should have is it a lot of this type of stuff or is there other things?
yeah, so first and foremost, it's a lot of this stuff that we've already talked about because they've determined that they should have done something that they didn't do, right?
Right.
And I get that not everyone wakes up in the morning and says, "Boy, I really wish I could go talk to an attorney."
Right. Right.
It's one of those things where, you know, you need to know your business. And then on the flip side, it's also you need to know what can impact your business. And it's difficult to, when you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And so, I just encourage people to at least acknowledge that there's certain things that they don't know and that there's value in going to someone. Like I know some things about taxes and stuff and things that businesses can do, but at the end of the day, I'm not a CPA. I'm not a
Right.
tax advisor, right?
Right.
And so while I do the legal side of things with the formations and the documents and making sure that, service agreements are in place and that, things are written in such a way that it reflects the agreement between the parties, like I'm not going to sit down and be a tax advisor. So I encourage my clients to seek that advice. And
Right.
so I guess what it boils down to is you need to realize and recognize your limitations and to get the team around you built up so that as things arise before they become problems,
Right.
hey, I can go to Mike, I can go to my CPA, John, I can go to, you know, uh, my business advisor even.
Right.
There's great companies here in the valley um, that will actually assess your processes, things that you do within the company to say, hey, are you doing things that will help you grow at a larger scale, right? And so um, just know who's out there that can benefit you, and don't be afraid to spend the money up front to make it
Right.
happen.
It's kind of that kind of the three you should get an attorney, a banker, and an accountant. I
There
mean,
you
as a
go.
business, you got to have those three because they all have the expertise and you're going to need them. So, well, this has been great. And again, it just reinforces to me why, businesses need to just, you know, what would they always say, slow down to speed up. I
You're
love
right.
that term. So, hey, so what would be the best way to someone to reach out to you, Mike?
Oh, yeah, the most surefire way is to call my office.
Okay.
We do have three offices, one in Idaho Falls, one here in Meridian, and one in South Jordan, Utah. But for me, I'm in the Meridian location.
Yeah.
208-904-4444 is the office number.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll put all the information for you in the show notes. So, well, this has been great. I really, really appreciate sharing all your knowledge because again, I have recent examples of where people did not follow your advice and now they're wishing they would have because there's problems. So, hey, I appreciate it. And so, till next time, this has been another episode of Treasure Valley NA Quick Tips, and thanks a lot.